Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. The Witcher 3 is one of those rare games that never truly leaves you. It's a world that feels suspended in time and still feels alive in the minds of all of us even 10 years later. Well, recently, new waves of reports and rumors have been circulating online suggesting that we might not yet be finished with this world. Of course, none of it is confirmed, but the timing of these rumors, combined with CDPR's broader plans for the Witcher universe, to me creates the possibility of something big. So today I wanted to explore what this DLC actually is, what rumors there are, and what a final story for The Witcher 3 could actually look like. Also quickly, if you enjoy this type of content, please consider subbing to the channel and dropping a like, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Before getting into any of the specifics, I think we should discuss what this DLC actually is. When people talk about the possibility of a new Witcher 3 DLC, they're mainly referring to the wave of rumors that began circulating after several outlets noted that CDPR may be preparing one final piece of story content for The Witcher 3. Of course, I think it's important to be clear from the onset that CDPR has not officially announced a new expansion and that nothing has been formally confirmed beyond what we know of future Witcher projects. But the reason this rumored DLC has gained so much traction is because there are real and documented developments within the studio that make the idea feel surprisingly plausible even now. As you're all aware, CDPR has already confirmed that multiple Witcher projects are in active development, including The Witcher 4 and The Witcher 1 remake, which is being built by Fool's Theory with CDPR oversight. But alongside these major titles, the studio has openly stated that they still plan to support legacy Witcher titles where appropriate, and of course the most striking example of this was the 2022 next-gen update for The Witcher 3. Not only did this update add visual enhancements, but it introduced a completely new quest in the Eternal Fire's Shadow, which was inspired by the Netflix series. To me, that single choice of adding new narrative content nearly 7 years after the game's original release shows us all that CDPR is still willing to return to this world in truly meaningful ways. I believe that it is this context that led to outlets like the Redanian Intelligence, which yes is an actual site for Witcher news, and GameRant began reporting on the possibility of another Witcher 3 expansion or DLC. More specifically, these articles describe rumors of an outsourced project, potentially handled by support teams like Fool's Theory, which would exist not as Witcher 4 content, but as something specifically built for The Witcher 3. However, again, none of these reports confirm anything, but they simply outline the idea of a bridging DLC, a piece of story content meant to ease players from the end of The Witcher 3 into the new saga. So when you hear people discuss the idea of a new Witcher 3 DLC, they're talking about the possibility of a final return to this world, 10 years after its initial release. Now let's actually dig into some of the leaks and rumors that we know of. As the conversation around this mysterious Witcher 3 DLC began to build, it wasn't because of any single leak or a sudden anonymous post claiming insider information. Instead, all of this momentum came from a small collection of reports that all happened a few months ago, each pointing towards the same unusual possibility, that The Witcher 3, a game seemingly long finished, might receive one final DLC. The first sparks came from Redanian Intelligence, a site that has a long history of accurately reporting on CDPR projects. They published a piece outlining whispers within the Polish development scene suggesting that an external studio may be working on a new piece of content tied specifically to The Witcher 3. Now, of course, the article never declared this as a fact, but it highlighted enough movement behind the scenes to make all of us pay attention. And then around the same period, GameRant also picked up the story, citing the same sources and adding that this rumored expansion or DLC could be targeting a 2026 release window. Again, like I've been saying, none of this was definitive, and simply reiterated that this DLC was early in development and was being handled by supporting teams. GameFragger echoed similar claims, but framed the rumored content as a potential bridge between the end of The Witcher 3, specifically in Blood and Wine, to The Witcher 4, giving us fans a narrative stepping stone between Geralt's last chapter to Ciri's first. But what gave these rumors more weight than the usual ones we see is that none of these outlets frame the story as some sort of wild leak or rumor. Instead, they've been treating it as a developing conversation that is built from quiet indicators such as CDPR's outsourcing patterns and the clear fact that the studio is more than willing to revisit The Witcher 3 with new content. However, community discussion online around the topic showed a lot of caution, with people often linking their ideas back to these articles rather than claiming or confirming any sort of actual insider knowledge. But there is some consistency across all of this in that this DLC, if real, is being handled externally, is narrative driven, and may serve as a connective tissue towards The Witcher 4. In fact, it's the idea of this bridge between The Witcher 3 and The Witcher 4 that has created the sense that something genuine might be happening behind closed doors. but I think it's still equally important to acknowledge the limitations of the rumors so far. We don't of course have any screenshots, leaked footage, or job listings to note that directly reference any new Witcher 3 content. Everything that I've discussed so far comes from interpretation and industry rumors and info rather than any concrete evidence. Yet I think that's part of why these rumors have resonated so deeply with the community. They're not promising anything outrageous, but they simply suggest the quiet possibility of one more story, a final return to a world that never really stopped calling us back. When we imagine what a new Witcher 3 DLC could look like, we often gravitate towards some sweeping, grand idea, either it be a grand epilogue or a hidden fourth act. But if you take a closer look at how CDPR has always approached post-launch Witcher storytelling, the real possibilities feel far more intimate and grounded in personal arcs rather than any world-ending threats. Hearts of Stone was a self-contained tragedy about bargains and identity. Blood and Wine was a farewell story that was steeped in reflection and closure. So to me, if this rumored expansion does exist, the most compelling version of it, I think, would follow that same emotional lineage in something quote-unquote smaller in scale, but enormous in thematic and emotional way. One of the most widely discussed possibilities for this DLC is a Ciri-focused story, and it's not difficult at all to understand why. She's of course the protagonist of the next trilogy of Witcher games, and her multiversal abilities already open narrative doors that Geralt simply cannot walk through. And whether in your save she became a Witcher or an Empress, each path carries questions about her that the game just never really answers. So an expansion centered on her could explore a moment in her journey without contradicting any of the game's endings. A story that exists between worlds quite literally, all shaped by the idea that Ciri is never in one place for too long. It's not a story that would need to define her, but it would simply give us more insight into her character as part of a final chapter for The Witcher 3. The other major narrative possibility I believe is a Geralt epilogue, something in the spirit of Blood and Wine but far smaller, focused on a singular conflict or some sort of personal reckoning. Personally, I kind of hope the DLC is this, but I know everyone's going to differ on this. For the majority of players, Geralt's story in The Witcher 3 ended not with death, but with peace, a sort of hard-earned quiet that almost feels fragile. And this new expansion doesn't need to disturb that peace, but just contextualize it. Maybe one final contract that focuses on him trying to confront what it means to step away from the path, or a story that lets him pass down his Witcher knowledge, or recognize that the world that he too often carried on his shoulders is beginning to move beyond him. I think that if CDPR ever wanted to offer us one final moment with Geralt before the new trilogy begins in full swing, it would almost certainly be a reflective and character-driven tale that would respect both his journey and his retirement. But then of course there's also the possibility of a transition story, something that aligns much closer to the rumors that suggest a sort of bridge into The Witcher 4. Now I don't think this story would be a direct setup for The Witcher 4, but it might introduce regions or factions that will later become important within the next game. As you might know, the continent is vast, and large parts of its geography and politics remain untouched in the Witcher games. So a DLC set in one of these lesser explored territories could quietly lay the thematic groundwork for the new saga without dictating any specific continuity. Just as Hearts of Stone expanded our understanding of the Northern Kingdoms in a small yet impactful way, this hypothetical DLC could broaden the narrative horizon in subtle ways, allowing us to experience new stories from the world that we already know. And finally, there's the simplest possibility, and perhaps the most CDPR-like, and that's a standalone tale that is completely disconnected from any main arcs or future plans. This to me is the type of story the studio has always excelled at, either it be a myth brought to life or a contract that spirals into something deeper. This kind of DLC would be perfect in avoiding the risks of contradicting player choices, and it would allow CDPR to craft a tightly focused narrative without the burden of legacy or transition. It could exist purely to explore a theme, a legend, or some sort of moral question, which I think is really the kind of storytelling that sits at the core of what made The Witcher 3 so unforgettable. Whatever it may be, all these possibilities tell one quiet truth, in that if CDPR does return to The Witcher 3, the story won't be about shaking the world. It will be about offering us one last window into characters and places that still resonate over a decade later. A DLC like this wouldn't at all rewrite the future of this series, but it would simply remind us all of why these stories mattered in the first place. To our final bit of discussion, with all the speculation circling this potential DLC, I think it's important to take a step back and separate what's rumored to what's actually confirmed. And the truth is, like I've been saying throughout, is that at the time of this recording, CDPR has not announced a new Witcher 3 expansion, nor have they acknowledged any sort of development tied specifically to new story content. What is confirmed, however, is the broader landscape the studio is currently operating within, a landscape that I think makes these rumors feel less like fantasy and more like a possibility that is worth paying attention to. As we all know, CDPR has openly shared that they are working on multiple Witcher projects simultaneously, including The Witcher 4 and the full Witcher 1 remake developed by Fool's Theory with CDPR oversight. These projects all reflect a studio that is very much committed to expanding the Witcher brand in the years ahead, especially with CDPR's ambition to make the new trilogy within just 6 years. But none of these announcements or developments mention The Witcher 3 directly, but they confirm that this world is an active priority for CDPR. The second major confirmed point is CDPR's ongoing support for The Witcher 3 itself. Like I mentioned earlier, in 2022, the studio released a fairly substantial next-gen update, adding visual improvements, quality of life changes, and most surprisingly, a brand new 1-hour quest. This update demonstrated to us all that CDPR is willing to return to The Witcher 3, not just with technical patches, but with new narrative content even 7 years after its release. But above all of this, I think the most important, fully confirmed piece of information is the upcoming official mod support for consoles that was announced earlier this year. Now, at the moment, this isn't tied to any DLC, but it shows that the studio is still investing resources, however small, into improving the Witcher 3 ecosystem, even a decade after launch. It's really a reminder that The Witcher 3 remains a living project, quietly supported as players' expectations continue to evolve. So while nothing in these developments outright confirms a new DLC, they create a backdrop where such a project would not at all feel out of place. CDPR hasn't promised us anything, but they've consistently shown that they're not finished with this world, and sometimes that's enough to keep the door open. At the end of the day, nothing about the potential DLC is confirmed, and CDPR may choose to leave the game as it is. But these rumors and the genuine possibility behind them speaks to something deeper. To me, it reflects the enduring pull of this world, and the simple truth that we never stopped caring about these characters. Whether a new expansion actually does materialize or not, the excitement around it shows just how alive The Witcher 3 is even 10 years later. Anyway, that's all from me for today's video. If you enjoyed, please consider subbing to the channel for more Witcher 3 and RPG content, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.